Hi, everybody. I'm Candid Frank. He's David Morisuti, and this is CFL Football Talk. And, I guess, first of all, as usual, thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And so here we sit, David. We had a conversation about the next commissioner. It's not anything other than obvious after the commissioner they had, whose background was a player, which is no small factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we saw what he did. He tried internationalizing the game. He made a few small. He swung for the fence and he hit a single, basically. You know, with the extra group of players now we have the internationals, right? Long to go with the nationals and of course the U.S. players. So it didn't quite work out. The international, our CFL footprint in the world hasn't really panned out the way he'd hoped. And as a player, I think he appreciated the rules of the game. Safety is something he did a great job in, at least from the perspective that I'm sitting at here today, knowing what it was before he arrived. He survived the CBA. He survived the pandemic. Survival, I don't think, can be defined as he did a great job with the pandemic. There are lots of questions as to, was there money on the table that he could have acquired and didn't? Was it never there? Was it ever going to be there? That's debatable. And we can do that here. We can debate that here today. And finally, the game itself, the rules have been, under his watch, the game is a much better game to watch than it was when he originally came. That's my synopsis in short of the impacts of Randy Ambrosie and his tenure as the CFL commissioner.
I think when you look at his tenure, and we kind of talked about it a bit when it was announced that he wasn't going to be returning. I think the game is at a good level in terms of the play on the field. I think that was a big one. Getting the ownerships as best situated as they could. Right. I think every team. Well, the only two teams that don't have singular ownership are Saskatchewan and Winnipeg. Those are the two teams that, in a way, hadn't really been an issue in terms of, bringing in money and revenue. But getting Edmonton, that was a big one. Montreal. I mean, Montreal and BC were the big wins for Randy Ambrosie, I think.
Toronto was. I'm trying to remember. They were partially involved because they weren't totally involved. Rogers wasn't part of ownership when Randy came to the Canadian Football League.
When did Randy? I'm just trying to remember when exactly Randy came. I think I want to say you're right because MLSE came just right after the Argos had won the Grey Cup. End of 2017.
They came in at 15. Not MLSE. TSN
and Bell came in at 15, and then 20. No, it was roughly around the same time. I think it was roughly around the same time. I don't think it was probably the old commissioner that sought out the ownership stuff. But I mean the whole change of ownership for Toronto really did start in 2015. So I look at it as Montreal, big win. BC, big win. Edmonton, we'll wait and see. That's still right. That's still relatively new. The big one for me that he didn't get done, and I think the pandemic obviously took away the momentum, was the 10th team.
Yeah.
Because the 10th team would have made things a lot easier for scheduling, for the balance of the two conferences, right? I think there was just so much that that would have done, and kind of just speaks to where the current situation of the CFL. It's at one point to get the teams, get ownership to buy into these teams, but these teams have already kind of gotten a pretty good lead, right? You're buying something that's already established. To start from fresh, that's very tough to make, because there's a lot of immediate investment, stadium, upfront costs, hiring a bunch of people. It's different than when you take over a team, and yes, you're paying for things, but everything is established. Everything, the groundwork has already been done. The roots are there. So, like for me, there was two things he didn't accomplish. That was to get in the 10th team and the idea to align with the XFL.
Or some sort of alignment.
Yeah, some whatever alignment that might have looked like.
And that's a good news, bad news thing, right? That isn't exactly something that we know would have been successful if it even happened. So, because we've tried that, we've witnessed expansion into the U.S. It isn't pretty. But to your point of ownership, I want to drill down on that. That not only did he bring those two teams in, he took over the Montreal Alouettes for a little while, but didn't hold on to it for a very long time. We've seen in the history of the Canadian Football League where you have an owner of BC also owns the Toronto Argonauts, and that lasted for years.
Yeah.
So, he was able to find good ownership. And really every new ownership that came in, I believe, if memory serves me correctly, wasn't a failure, was a success. Every change, if he had any say on who the ownership is in relation to any other commissioner, he didn't, at least he didn't strike out, and I think he hit a couple of home runs, like you said. So he had a good day at the plate when it comes to ownership, a really good day. So ownership and the game. And that in itself, to me, David, I know it's really easy to criticize the commissioner, and we hear a lot of criticism. But maybe, unfortunately, people tend to bury the lead. The lead is, are there two factors that are more important to the Canadian Football League and any league for that matter? Any league, ownership and the game. Is there anything else, David, that's more important to that? Obviously, money is a thing, right? No doubt about it. But where I think a commissioner and the league can control and not make a mistake, and need not to make a mistake, is in the game and how it's played, and ownership. Because if they have those two things, the money part has a chance. And you've mentioned, whenever given the opportunity or the situation calls for it, have talked about the new media and how the Canadian Football League either doesn't have the money or the will. Well, three things: the money, the will, or the knowledge to foster that group of people. And it just coincidentally is those are the people that you want that are younger, because that's what we're talking about here. When we talk about new media, we're talking about the CFL getting into the younger market.
Yeah. Well, getting into the younger market, but also getting into a little more relevance, right? And it's been established how good of a Canadian product it is, especially for the TV audience, and the numbers do back it up. But if you're going to try to get to those other platforms, it's not enough to say we got people watching on TV. They're going to say, "What's your digital outreach like? Are you able to gravitate towards, as you said, the younger audience? Are you able to get to where most sports leagues are trying to get? NHL was streaming, NFL was streaming, NBA has done streaming, right? There's opportunities there, but the thing is, they're not going to do it for a local product. There's got to be a bit of an appeal to a wider audience.
And there's a roadmap as well, because other people have done it. So it's not like the CFL doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. They just can check out what the wheels that are out there.
Well, that's it, right? I think I see this as, and we haven't even talked about what the new commission. We haven't even heard from the new commissioner really. From
Well,
all
that's a good segue for me.
right.
We've got what he said. May I interrupt
Yeah,
you just
go
for the
right
sake
ahead.
of doing what you're suggesting? What we have from the commissioner is this partial. I'll call it a partial statement, more of an introduction in his own words. I am deeply humbled and proudly honored by this incredible opportunity, said Commissioner Johnson. Long before I worked with TSN and RDS to broadcast the CFL, I was a fan. Growing up, I sat with family and friends watching the legends of the game. I've loved working closely with the league, getting to know its stars, and being part of the most unforgettable celebration in Canadian sports, Grey Cup week. To think that I will present that iconic trophy to this year's winners in Winnipeg this November is a dream come true. So I'll let you first. He was born in Toronto, raised in Ottawa, went to Queen's University. So that's a bit of and he has a business degree. And what I'll say before you continue, because I interrupted you, is this: he's been around TSN, RDS, two big players in the Canadian Football League in the media, two fair-sized corporations, businesses that do at least try to reach into the type of media you were talking about before I interrupted you.
Yeah.
How advantageous is it that he's been in that position, able to at least glean some knowledge about outreach to the younger people in a different way? Everybody, right? What do you think from that perspective?
So here's what he had. Here's the line that really strikes out to me. As we look ahead, our mission is clear: to grow the game of football, to enhance the entertainment experience for our fans, and to ensure the sustainability and success of our league for generations to come. Generations to come, meaning we got to look to the future. How are we going
not the last three generations, the next three?
Right? How is the league going to be able to sustain and find a way to, ensure that it's not going to be, heading in the wrong direction? I don't even know if it's the wrong direction per se. It's more so to ensure that the league isn't falling behind, right? I understand. Like I think CFL fans need to understand that the CFL product is good. We don't doubt that at all. But what we can't get caught up in is thinking that, okay, let's see it get to the point of where, the NHL, MLB, like, you can't think on those levels, because those sports, they're competing on a different scale. I think that's fair to say, but it doesn't mean that the league doesn't have areas where it can get better. There's certainly ways. I think it starts with relevancy, becomes a big one, right? It's relevant. This league is relevant in the cities that it does well in. It's not hard to see why it doesn't do well in certain areas, because it falls behind what people think is quality, entertainment, right? We know the product's good. We've talked about it many times before. We talk about how the tickets are reasonably affordable, but it doesn't, people just don't gravitate towards it. And I think it's, what has the league done differently to bring in new fans, right? And I think that's probably the biggest one there. And I think it starts on two folds for me. One is your grassroots. How are you doing on the grassroots of football in these places where maybe the league isn't, thriving? Is it embedded within the identity of the city? Football is Canadian football embedded, right? Then you have to ask yourself, if it's not, why isn't it? What can be done to improve it? And then thirdly, what can you do to make people see that, a little more than just, the few times in the year that people are all there for the Grey Cup? How do you get more people to say, hey, I wanna, this is something maybe I want to see a little bit more, for, more times in the year. Like, you got to find a way. And it's not just, and again, I think everyone looks at it as, how do you get more people to come to games? How to get more people in the seats? To me, that's not it. That's not it. It's how many people are talking about the league. How many people are giving the league its fair chance, right? Putting some time into actually thinking about the league and talking about the pros and cons of the league, or even just, making it normal to talk about the CFL. Because Frank, you and I both know it's not. It's the league does not. The league, there's still people who, aren't shy about giving a shot against the league because, it's not seen as trendy in a lot of ways.
All right. So I guess from what you said, to respond to what you said and add to what you said, essentially what we're looking for here is to find a commissioner that can ignite interest in the Canadian Football League from people outside the Canadian Football League, bring them in, and then have the ability to keep them interested once they see the game and be a part of it, not just at Grey Cup time, but in the regular season. And I think, as having listened to you in the past, I think this is something that I know we agree on because you brought it up, and that is to hold the interest in the game as long as you can during the year, even outside the regular season, and what you do to maintain that interest and grow that interest. It's not just about getting a wider audience, it's about getting a deeper one that is more engaged in the game, which is, again, this sounds like repetition, but I hope it's because I'm trying to be more specific and drilling down reasonably well. And that is that somebody comes to the game, watches the game, and enjoys the game so much, when they go home, they want to see the replays of the game. They want to hear from people who understand the game, what they're talking about, and they engage with those people as well. So it's the ancillary part of the Canadian Football League that is, in my view, the darkest part of the CFL experience. The part that speaks to a lack of the kind of success it needs. In other words, it's not just about going to the Grey Cup. It's not just about going to the game. It's about the experience of being a CFL fan and surrounding yourself with all the extra doodads that the game can offer you, including, purchasing all different kind of swag, getting that interest in it, being a proud CFL fan, which helps it rolling, right? Because at the end of the day, it begins and ends at the game for CFL fans. Most. How do we create the kind of dedication, loyalty, and interest, the two teams that you mentioned, Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, the interest that they have? We have an example existing today. We have not necessarily a template, but we do have a path in what the BC Lions were doing. It would have helped if the team would have done better. But under the circumstances, we saw a glimmer of hope where a new ownership came in with a new kind of energy to raise the interest of the game, not just the game that's played, but the game and what it represents.
I think you touch on a lot of good things there. I think you can't. I guess the big thing, we were at the CFL Awards where they recognized that person from the Lions front office who played a big part in the engagement that this team gets, and we saw it even with the owner when we got a chance to talk to the owner. The amount of investment that team puts in to bring fans in, to bring them to games, to get them to come to games. Like, it's that's the big, in my opinion, that's the big step that every team needs to make. What are you doing to make the game accessible, right? Are you finding ways to provide, promotion, not just promotion, but promotion that people see as a good deal, as a good value. You know, they had in Toronto last year, there was a big opportunity with the Blue Jays not doing so well, and ticket prices going up a bit, that maybe you could go and get some of those fans to come to Argo games instead. It's tough because the Jays have kind of owned the summer landscape for a bit. Even TFC has had that struggle too. Um, Toronto, the Argos have going for them right now, success. They're not a team that's struggling to win. They're not a team that's struggling to put together, respectable seasons. They've gotten the competition part down, which they didn't have for years. Now, what the team has got going on, we talked about it at length in the last show, the World Cup. The change is going to be made during the World Cup to help maybe, get liven up BMO Field a little bit. I think that's a big one there. But yeah, if I'm the commissioner right now, I think his goal is how do I sell this game on other platforms? How do I get more people invested? And also, how do I convince the owners to invest? That's the commissioner's big job,
Yeah.
right? That's a big one there.
One consistent situation that has been reported on repeatedly, broadly, really, has been the fact that all 9 ownership groups cannot get on the same page. And the challenge there is clear. Somehow this commissioner, the next commissioner, has to have tools that the past commissioners haven't had. And the kind of power a commissioner needs to have a longer view of what's necessary to be done, because what needs to be done in the Canadian Football League isn't, you know what? Let's start in May and we'll see if we can get this going by June. No, that's not the kind of change that they need. They need the kind of change that says, all right, it's 2025. Where do we want to be in 2028? I know that sounds maybe counterintuitive to many people, but there has to be a long view, because some of the real changes that the league has to make, that we on the outside see as needing to be made, which is just different people have different opinions, but the point being that it has to be an opinion that can withstand the criticism and or the impatience that develops, because sometimes the best plans are the plans that require patience. And ownership in the Canadian Football League has one patient view, their opinion, and I mean individually. And there has to be a cooperative relationship fostered here. And if this commissioner can finally do that and get these ownership groups to understand that we need to do something that benefits all of us in the long run, and if he can do that, he might be able to build on some of the improvements we've had with the strength of ownership and the way the game is being played.
Yeah. No, I mean, we there's a lot of things that have been done during Randy Ambrose's time that have helped the league, and there's things that we didn't like that maybe this commissioner will think otherwise. I mean, if I had a chance to talk to the commissioner, I would say, do you believe that the current management cap is something that helps teams remain competitive?
Well, hopefully we'll get that chance. I mean, we are on the list of people that the Canadian Football League calls when they have their little media scrums, whether it be in person or, on the internet. Regardless, I hope you can ask that question. I hope I've got questions, a whole bunch of questions I would like to ask, and I know I won't be first on the list, So that's why I work really hard with the next 8 or 9 questions, because by the time it's our turn, or my turn anyway, I know that a lot of people will have asked questions. But I believe there's enough questions in my head that there's some that I believe others may not ask, and I'd like to have the answers to those questions. And the root of those questions would be always to the idea of how do you develop like I said, the width of interest in the landscape, but also how you can maintain their interest in more than just games. And that's where my question, depending on what's asked, will come from. Because I want to hear that. I want to hear what the plan is and what are you bringing to the Canadian Football League that hasn't been brought in your view. You say you've been a fan of the league. You've been involved in directly communicating what the games and some of the stuff that's done, like the weekly half-hour shows that are done, about the Canadian Football League. He's been involved in that, I assume. So, what have you learned from your position and seen from the Canadian Football League? What are the gaps that you see need to be filled? That's what I want to know. That will increase the interest and lower the average age of Canadian Football League
Well,
generation.
the big talk about the new commissioner, and everyone's been saying the next Canadian TV deal, the next Canadian TV deal, how important that is, and how important the TV deal is. And I'm like, why are we so stuck on to the TV being the big priority? I get it. That's going to draw in a lot of your revenue. That's good. That's a big revenue item for this league. It has been ever since TSN and the CFL have been partners. But what are you doing outside of the TV deal to grow your league, to grow your fan base, to grow your audience? That's what I would ask the commissioner. It's great that you guys obviously understand the importance of the next TV deal because you're getting this commissioner a chance to work on it early, right? He's not being brought in with the deal expiring. It expires in 2026. So this is something that's obviously a top priority, but it can't be the sole. Like, there's almost a 1A, 1B in my opinion. The TV deal is the 1A. The 1B though is what are your other platforms that you're gonna look to help push, right?
Or at least the kinds of platforms.
What investment is the CFL willing to make to improve on those platforms? Because I don't think in my opinion, I haven't seen that investment. I haven't seen that investment from the league in those other platforms. You hear a lot about Genius and what they were going to do and this and that. I personally haven't seen it, right? How are you getting your, we talked about it. The only way the CFL keeps the interest after the season is done, if the TV partners are not going to do it, you got to find other partners to do it, right? And I think that's the big one there.
Yeah, and I'd like to hear. I don't have to hear specifics. It's not about the specifics. It's about where you're looking for this kind of stuff. The other thing that I don't even know where it sits. The betting group that the CFL got involved in. I haven't heard a word from them recently. Are they still involved with the Canadian Football League? Is that an avenue that hasn't been explored but has its upside? We don't even know that, David. I don't know. Do you? I don't know. There's partnerships. Is another thing to consider. What kind of partnerships does this commissioner think the CFL should be involved in? Are those partnerships another league? Is the UFL a reasonable step in the right direction? And this is where the commissioner of the day, I think, has to look and has to figure out a way to be able to either have all the teams agree to go in the same direction, or at least have the teams that don't think it's a great idea don't work towards undoing it, but at least are willing to at least be a passenger in giving it a chance to develop. Whatever these new partnerships are, whatever these new ideas are, at the end of the day, David, I think that's the first step. That if we hear that there are teams who don't really agree with what they're planning on doing, but are willing to sit back and take notes and make an honest effort in looking into a new idea and not torpedoing it because it doesn't fit into their little square, and I say that on purpose because I'm setting up using the words looking outside the box, right? Because essentially the CFL is a box. Now we don't know, we can't here assume that they've created the box and have decided to stay in the box, or is it circumstances that have put them in that box, and how can they go outside that box? That's the key thing. In a way, this is the same thing we've been saying, right? It's about how you think and how you think about making the kind of change that can grow the game, not just a little, but exponentially. Because that's the kind of talk that you're bringing forward. If someone figures out the Rubik's Cube of streaming and reaching the 20-plus-year-olds on the internet that don't watch television but will watch Canadian Football League, nowhere to find it, we'll watch it, we'll be dedicated to it, and watch everything else, all the ancillary stuff that happens outside of the game and the game broadcast. That, to me, is the challenge of this next commissioner.
Yeah. And it'll be a big challenge for him for sure. And again, I know we've seen what we've seen in the in this press releases, but I would love the chance to be able to ask him some of these things. I like to be able to hear him talk about these things, even if we don't get a chance to ask him. I'm hoping that this new commissioner is also not just going to be, I wouldn't say ducking the media, but also like make himself a little more available to talk, right? Have a news conference, have some more.
I suspect Randy didn't willingly not talk to people. I think there was a bit of, shh, be quiet. I don't see him as a guy. I don't see him as somebody cowering from the media, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, but I think that again, like we hear from Gary Bettman a lot more than we hear from Randy Ambrosie. Like not just here, but the media being able to talk to
absolutely. And the reason for that, David, I think we can agree, is that Gary Bettman has done one thing that I shouldn't say no CFL commissioner, not many CFL commissioners have been able to accomplish, and that is to develop a consensus and then act on that consensus. The Canadian Football League, under the past few commissioners, at least the last two, could not arrive at consensus. That's the, so, how can a commissioner go out and talk about stuff if he knows he's saying something somebody disagrees with? You know what I mean? And when they can't agree on anything, that leaves the commissioner to say very little publicly.
Mm-hmm. No, that's true.
That's my opinion. That's just my opinion. I have no reason.
I just find that we don't get enough. Again, this offseason has been talked about more because, well, I mean, after the Grey Cup, it was a bit of a lull period. Now we're getting more talk. Like we have news to talk about today that we didn't have before. We have a coach that's been re-signed and a team that's got that had a big trouble. BC. Oh, do you want to talk about Dice first? Or you want to talk about BC?
Go ahead. Tell me about Dice.
Okay, well, Dice signed a contract extension. It's not a massive one, just till the end of 2026. I think good for him. I think Ottawa has been heading in the right direction. I think there's still areas that they're lacking a little bit, but I think they've been taking steps forward. So I like where Ottawa's going, and I think when you look at his tenure in Ottawa so far and what Ottawa has done this offseason, they've made improvements, but I'm like, is it going to be enough? When you look at, Hamilton really started to come on its own. What's Montreal's going to look for a bounce back after what was probably a disappointing season for them. But I do like that Ottawa's pushing forward. They're not looking to take that step back that we've seen them take, right? Where they go forward, they're a playoff team, win a Grey Cup, and then they're at the bottom of the division. Like, find a little bit of that consistency. So good on Dice. Let's see if he's, they're giving him 2 years to see if he's the guy to lead this team. Otherwise, I'm sure this organization wants to see some success. A little more than good. They had good success this year, but I think there's an appetite for more.
I think what I'll say about that, what I'll say about the Dice signing and it running the time that it's running, speaks to an important need for every organization, especially organizations that want to be successful. One of the biggest traits in the Canadian Football League that is necessary to be a winner, and especially if you want to be a consistent winner, is continuity. I think continuity is a word that every organization in the Canadian Football League has to try and achieve. They have to work towards attaining it. Continuity of players in the locker room, continuity of coaching, continuity of ownership, continuity of fan engagement, and having a coach and saying, this is our coach for the next few years, is saying, hey, we're committed to this coach. We're giving him a nice runway here to see what he can do. We've had him for a while. Didn't have the kind of experience head coaches have, ones that have a long history, because he doesn't have a long history. So now he's been around for a while. We think we see the promise of a head coach who could, let's face it, bring us a Grey Cup. You're not signing him for 2 years just to see, if he can get in the playoffs. This is the kind of runway that says we need to see results. So now we've given you what it takes for you to have a longer runway and a longer opportunity to have the kind of consistency with players. And, they've got a GM now who was new a few years ago. Burke came into Ottawa with a good reputation, very important player and bringing players to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And now he brought his show to, Ottawa. Had some difficulty with options and choices that he made because of injuries to the quarterback specifically. They're over that now. They've got a young quarterback whom I think, is obviously not even close to being the best player he can be. I see an upside to their quarterback that a lot of teams wish they had. It's why the Argos signed their quarterback to such massive numbers, right? It's about promise, right? So there's a few quarterbacks out there, and every team wants them.
Well, I think the big one here is, once you have a quarterback, support him, and if you think he's the real deal, really, give him the tools to be successful, right? If they believe Drew Brown is the guy, give him those tools to be successful. Give him a running back, and have a running back in the playoffs. Like, how do you expect to win when you don't have a proper running back position? They went and got Geno Lewis, good. They went and got Dana Baboye. They've taken some good steps. They've taken advantage of some teams that couldn't afford certain players, and they have an abundance because they're not paying their quarterback.
Is Baboye a prospective feature back?
I think for what he's being paid, he should be. I don't know if he's a feature back, but he deserves more than what he got in Toronto.
So that means that they still haven't done what you think is most important. They need a feature back. They need somebody to carry the ball in the playoffs and give the team the other option. Give a quarter, because this conversation turned towards the quarterback. And even though the quarterback's not a running back, he could sure use one that can run the ball.
If I'm looking at the team right now, just pulling up their roster, the running back position includes stand back. Yeah, well, like the thing is William stand back more of a feature back than Dana Baboye? I think you're going to see a bit of a timeshare.
Yeah, absolutely. But that doesn't mean, it can be done by committee. The Argos won, they won a Grey Cup with a feature one, right?
Mhm.
But it's not like they were strayed away from any other running backs. They had a platoon there. They had 3, 4 running backs that they were throwing out there. And the reason for that, I think, is that to make sure that their feature quarterback was fresh and able to run the ball to the best of his ability. And that's what it's all about. Either way, it has to be a committee, because even a great running back like the Argos have had the past couple of years still needs a support staff. Adeboboye was one of them in this case, and proved for a time that he could be the other guy, and that's important. I don't think we're suggesting that you have to have one guy and that's it. I know we're not suggesting that, but you need somebody that eventually, when push comes to shove, you hand them the ball and you get the first down you need, right?
Well, let's not forget, like the Argos, I thought they were done with Kadeem Carey. They brought him back. They
Yep.
re-signed Deonta McMahon. They also signed Kevin Brown. Like, if I'm Ottawa, that's probably the one thing I would look at is can we improve our running back room? Can we get some other options in there to take some of that pressure off of our quarterback? Because yes, as good as your quarterback is, your quarterback needs to be given a chance.
Right. He needs an opportunity to be able to expose defenses, and defenses are very good. That if you are a one trick pony, no matter how good that trick is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
no, it's true. It's very true.
so it's important. So yes, I think he's a good. The topic was the new and improved the new improved head coach of the Ottawa Red Blacks earned his. I think he earned the trust of the general manager and the rest of the organization, and the players for that matter. I think that's a primary requirement in coaching in the Canadian Football League, because there are so many players in that locker room, so many personalities. There are so many units. The head coach, while one of many, is the guy that stirs the drink in the locker room, in my opinion. So what he does and who he has working with him is very important. His ability to, select good people that can strengthen his weaknesses and also flesh out the full requirement of a football team to be successful, as full as it can be under every circumstance. The GM's the guy that's got to have the coach and work with the coach to figure out what the best template for a championship team is, and that's the key. In Toronto and Winnipeg, Montreal for a short time, those relationships were fruitful and victories were had because of that. It's about the organization, of which the coach, general manager, and basically the assistant coaches and the people hired are the reason why people win Grey Cups. And that's what Ottawa's hoping here with their head coach. We'll see if they shore up what we see as weaknesses. They may have solutions that we don't even know who they are, David. As you know, the beauty of the Canadian Football League is overnight stars exist aplenty.
No, for sure. And you talk about Grey Cups and want to push for a Grey Cup. Oh, BC. Oh, BC. That was a costly miss, huh, Frank?
Oh, and they spent a lot of money to make that to fail.
They
Right?
spent a lot of money to
They were the team who went the most over the cap. And it's no coincidence.
Not only going over the cap, but how much they had to pay after going over the cap.
No
They
kidding.
weren't the only team that went over the cap. 4 teams did. BC, Toronto, Saskatchewan, Ottawa. But Toronto was like, how much? Toronto was 87,000. BC, 340. Okay, we'll round up 348,000. And they got fined, if I'm not mistaken.
They had 2 draft picks. They lost 2 draft picks.
2 draft picks, but it was also
money.
The extra fines on top of that. Like, man, I really feel. I mean, now you know why the owner pushed to make those changes, because
it's not like he didn't give them the tools to win.
Yeah. And look, I think it was important for the league to do that. You know, the $350,000 is not a is that, like that's not a drop in the bucket. That's significant for a CFL
The
team.
total cap is under 6 million.
Yeah. So
Total cap.
so teams that exceed the salary cap by less than 100,000 receive a dollar for dollar fine. Okay, so the Argos would have gone like the 80 something thousand. But when you violate up to 300,000, you receive a fine of double the amount in excess and result in the forfeiture of the team's next available first round pick.
Yikes.
So, yeah, so it'll come out to almost $643,000 in fines for this team,
plus two assets.
plus two assets. So, unreal. But it's important. I'm not going to feel sorry for BC because
they had the Grey Cup every year that a team has the Grey Cup. It's almost guaranteed they're going to go.
I'm sure they made quite a bit of money off the Grey Cup too.
Yeah. But, well, not as much as they would have made in the past because now the league and the league benefits and other teams benefit no matter where the Grey Cup goes.
But you need to maintain some level of competitive, I wouldn't say dignity, but understanding that you can't just be telling teams, yeah, no, you're hosting the Grey Cup, go nuts.
No,
I'm very happy that the league wrote down how much the teams went over. But what would really help, Frank? What would really help?
Players' contracts.
If we disclose what teams are spending. You say you have this amount on the salary cap. So guess what?
They barely disclosed there was an increase in the salary cap, David.
What? Again, this type of stuff here.
Money's a very sensitive topic for the Canadians.
If you want to talk about how you keep people investing in your league throughout the year, you would have people debate. Can they afford to do this? Can they afford to do that? Is this player being overpaid? Is this player being underpaid? Like, those are sort of things that Frank, you and I know I do a Leaf podcast. We spend maybe a good chunk of it talking about contracts.
Absolutely.
Because all that stuff is publicly available. Give me a break. Give me a break. Even the PWHL, you hear more about player contracts than you do the CFL. Give me a break. Like, and look, I'll give the league credit. They at least disclose the amounts. I think that's by design. I think they're supposed to. There's probably a mention in the CBA that they have to, because I'm sure the CFL would have just said, all right, we're doing this to BC for going over the salary cap, but not even properly telling the fans, why is my team being dinged so much?
Well, the specifics of the rules being broken and why the rules are being exercised is important. And that when it comes to that, I don't think anybody's foolish enough to think that transparency isn't the answer. But when it comes to players' salaries, I really do think they should be disclosed. I know that as a rule, we all believe and have been led to believe, for whatever reason, that the salaries in the Canadian Football League are not near what the players deserve. So, when broadcast, the salaries, when they're broadcast, we'll get a real good understanding of how little these players are paid in the perspective of professional sports.
Yeah.
We already
know that they're not paid that much.
What's the shame in letting us know? I mean, I understand. And the reason why a lot of teams were upset with the salary cap announcement after free agency started, the reason was simple. Is now you got players going, I think you played me for a sucker. Whether they did or whether they didn't, it still adds up to that. Like, I mean, if I'm a player, I would be very pissed to know that the team had more money to get, and meanwhile the team is telling me, listen, the cap is only this much, and we're looking at you as a percentage of the amount. We need to spread the money around. We only have X amount of dollars. Well, it turns out it's X plus Y, right? And that's not a good feeling if you're a player. Hopefully that'll never happen again, because that was wrong. That, David, I think we both agree. That was wrong. That should never happen again. The cap, if it's going to be adjusted, I think should be discussed at the immediate. I think almost it should be considered immediately after the Grey Cup's awarded.
Grey Cup, do a Grey Cup week. The NHL has their board of governors meetings, and they usually get that number out before.
And if it isn't a number, I congratulate the National Hockey League, or the reporters that are reporting on the National Hockey League, who already were talking about there's going to be a salary cap bump. It's going to be about this much. You don't have to be specific, but you can tell the fans and everybody, and it's a good feeling, right? Look at how great the Canadian Football League somehow has to figure out a way to get in that same lane the National Hockey League was in. Impossible, really, but I'll still say it anyway. The National Hockey League tried something new that they hadn't done in years. They had the Four Nations Cup. They tried something new. They basically said, okay, we're whether the media did it or whether they threw out the little carrot saying, well, the cap's going to go up. We know the impact those two things had on the National Hockey League after they happened, or after the word got out, right? I mean, the positive spin on the National Hockey League, it at least 10, 20 fold. The positivity, if there was a positivity rating that somebody did, the positivity rating would have jumped on the National Hockey League. And why I said that the Canadian Football League should learn for that, is there something they can do to ignite interest in the Canadian Football League? Is it an all-star game? I don't know. It's some sort of exhibition game? I don't know. Maybe an exhibition game. Again, this is just me thinking stupid without really figuring out if it's possible. Mm-hmm. Maybe they can't be part of a league thing with another league. Maybe they can't combine with another league. But what's to stop an exhibition game of the best players in the UFL against the best players in the Canadian Football League?
Why not pick the two teams that played in the championship game?
Exactly. And have an exhibition game. It's about sparking interest. That's what it's about. That's what I say about the lesson that we can learn for those of us that have followed the National Hockey League closely, that those were two things that really, really goosed up the interest in the National Hockey League, put the game in people's lips. Even silly things like 3 fights in 9 seconds. It went viral, literally, figuratively, in every way possible. This is what the Canadian Football League has to do. This is what the new commissioners, if I can wrap this show up by going back to the commissioner that's been hired, and former TSN guy Stuart Johnston. That's what has to happen. Somehow that has to be his goal.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. You got to find ways to make, don't be afraid to be a little innovative. Don't be afraid to try something new. If it, I understand Randy Ambrosie did that with the global draft, but I'll commend him for trying. Didn't work because maybe they didn't give it the proper. How do I put it?
It didn't get the correct push. It wasn't a tush push. It was like a push on one side. It wasn't 100%. Not everybody bought into it, so it wasn't a unified front, which is what they need for these ideas. That it's again. Oh, I said you'd have the last word.
No, but I think you're right, Frank. No, go ahead, say it.
No, the commissioner needs to be able to make decisions, and the owners need to say, I'm going to bite my tongue right now, and let's just see, at least give it a chance to see if it has any life, if there's anything positive that can come from it, instead of going, nope, don't like that idea. It doesn't work within the framework of how our organization works. That's a waste of money in our part. That's a waste of effort in our opinion. There has to be an openness, because the owners want to make more money. They want to make their teams more valuable. Well, you're going to have to be more open to the ideas that may bring that forward and bring that to life. That's and to me, this is an opportunity. It's a sad day that Randy Ambrosi no longer the commissioner, right? Oh, sorry for Randy. Gee, too bad he can't carry on. Well, that's not what matters anymore. Randy now is in the history books. We have a new commissioner. What have we learned from past commissioner experiences? The major one is let him lead you. That's what I say to the owners. Let him lead you.
Exactly. No, for sure.
And he does come from a place that understands media, clearly.
Yes, he does.
Right? And when we talk about media, again, we're talking about reaching 2 generations younger than we have right now. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about bringing in the generations that are not involved in the Canadian Football League to the degree that they need to be involved to make this league successful. And to the owner's point, more valuable. To the player's point, we talked about those players, what they give and what they get paid. There's no equity there. It's unequal. The effort that players give is everything they have. We know the players. We talk to the players. We witness how they play. We see the effort. And we know comparatively to other sports, they are underpaid. And that's not to blame the Canadian Football League. That's not to blame the owners. That's just the state that they're in my opinion.
Well, you can say it's not their fault, but you can also say what have they done to really push forward the idea of increasing the salary cap so they can get more, a better pay, right? So that's kind of twofold. Yes, they haven't, certain things have kept them from making it, but what have they done to increase the portfolio? And they finally have seen an increase. It's the first increase I've seen in a bit. Now, what are they going to do to get more?
Yeah. So to be clear, what I'm saying is I'm not denying and not trying to hide the fact that maybe owners have made mistakes and the league has made mistakes. But to my earlier point, which is the one I'd like to stress, and that is this is an opportunity for a fresh start. Mm-hmm. And with that start comes stop looking back, look forward. Let's not worry about the mistakes they made before, other than remembering the mistakes and how they happened and what we can learn from them. It's time to move forward, try new things. And we've got a guy who's a different thinker now in charge of the Canadian Football League. Stuart Johnson, a fan, born in Toronto, raised in Ottawa, understood college football, Canadian college football, understands the media really well. And I know from this show, from CFL Talk, we wish him the best to have success, because the more success the Canadian Football League has, the more interest there'll be in this show. So you can see I'm being very selfish. Mm-hmm. My motivation is very selfish. I want, and I've said this before, and I'll close with this. I promise this is how I'm going to close. My close is this. I believe I'm a valued reporter in the Canadian Football League. I do believe that. But I also believe if I find myself under the bar of value required to be that person, to continue as a reporter in the Canadian Football League. In other words, if I'm not good enough to be a reporter in the Canadian Football League because those seats are filled with people and organizations better than me, I'll say thank you. And I step back because I love the game, not just more than myself, but more than my interest, my personal interest, because I know how great this game is.
Yes, absolutely. There's potential with the league. The league has got a long-standing reputation, but we want to see it improve. We always do. We always want to see things reach their full potential.
Well, it's been an interesting hour, David. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. And don't forget, Locked On Maple Leafs. You can Google that. David and Mike do that, otherwise known as Al's brother. Do their hockey show. I've been a guest on it. Thanks, David. It was fun doing it. Love talking hockey. Love talking CFL. Heck, I love talking sports. And I hope you enjoyed our CFL program for today. And if you have any opinions, you can always Facebook me. You'll find just Google Candid Frank and you'll find me. Anything you want to tell me, any suggestions, even what we do here, please do. And don't forget, David Morisuti also writes for Sportsnet. So you'll find some of his stuff. And sometimes his stuff doesn't have his name on it. So when you see a story and it doesn't have a name on it, there's a good possibility David might have wrote it. David, thanks for doing this, buddy.
Thank you, Frank.
We'll see you all next time. It was fun doing this as always. Thanks for watching. Usually we do this Mondays at 4, but it's the off season, so we wait for news to happen so we have something to talk about. And obviously some news happened. See you next time.